Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the SAE SoCal section virtual webinar. We have a very exciting topic for you this evening, discussing connected vehicle technology. But before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items regarding our upcoming events. For April 27th, which is next week, a week from today, we have a webinar with the topic of advanced driver assistance systems. So ADAS, we'll be discussing testing methods and protocols, as well as future regulations. And then in June, we're looking for volunteers for our Formula SAE Nevada competition. And this activity will take place from June 16th through the 19th. Those who are interested in becoming a volunteer, I have listed the web link here. You'll also be able to find this information on our webpage, which is www.saesocal.org for further information. And towards the end of the webinar, I'll also show this contact information again for those who may have missed it during the program. Regarding our section itself, we have our social media links, our LinkedIn information, as well as Facebook. And then we'd like to request for those participants on the webinar this evening, if interested in future programming, to consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.saesocal. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce my SAE colleague, whose name is Dean Case. He's the Vice Chair for Memberships, and he will introduce us into our program for this evening. Hey, Dean.
Thank you, Delbert. This is a fun one for me tonight because I've known our speaker, Jeff Varick, for a long time. I guess I can't really hide our age, but we met in the early 90s. Jeff graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, where he got his BSME. He was the SAE student leader at the time and led their Baja effort. And so he started out similar to many of us as a SAE student competitor, went on to a career at General Motors, spent a lot of time over in Europe when GM had healthy operations over there, took time out to get his MBA from Wharton, and then ended up kind of doing a little bit of career change, going from the OE side, moving over to Johnson Controls, where he worked as their director of marketing strategy, before going out on his own, starting Brand Motion. So he's one of those guys who had great technical chops, but also had a passion for the business, and started Brand Motion 15 years ago. And it's kind of funny the way these small world things are. His company kind of grew to a nice, strong position at the SEMA organization. And the company I was working for at the time was 2 rows over. So I'd always see Jeff at the SEMA show in Las Vegas. And every year they had a bigger booth and cooler products. So this is something that has been very interesting. Jeff's also been very active on the SAE front for his entire career. He's currently a member of the International Board of Directors, as well as a trustee for the SAE Foundation. So what time he isn't spent either with work, SAE, or his family, he's also been very passionate about water. So he did volunteer work with water.org, which is making sure that everyone had access to clean, healthy water. So really happy to introduce a fantastic colleague, but also a longtime good friend from SAE, Mr. Jeff Varick. Jeff? Take it off mute, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Dean. That's awesome. It's great to be with you, and man, listening to you, I realize how far back we go. And I love to tell the story too of how Mini Baja was my first entrepreneurial experience, and really, completely corrupted me. I did the OEM thing for a while, but I wanted to get back to what the Baja was like, which was awesome. So thanks everybody. I'll put up my my screen here, and I'll start talking about the topic. Are you guys catching that? Dean, are you catching the slides?
Yeah, slides up, roll. And just a note for the audience, Jeff's going to speak for about 30 minutes or so of open Q&A, but he's calling in from 3 hours plus in Michigan, so we're going to let him go to bed at a reasonable hour. So we're not going to let this one drag out too long. So if you have questions, please post to the Q&A portion.
No problem. It's a great pleasure. Anything to support an SAE chapter. I'm very happy to do. SAE has been a part of my entire career. So what we're going to talk about tonight is a passion of mine is connected vehicles. I really wish I was there in person in Southern California talking about it with you. And you don't realize how much I mean that. This was a picture out my window about 45 minutes ago. So we're getting snow here in Ann Arbor and Detroit, and I thought we were done with it, but you never know in Michigan. You don't have that same problem in Southern California, fortunately. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about a few topics around connected vehicles, specifically V2X. I want to give you guys an update. I want to give you an overview on what's been happening in a little overview with the technology, and then what's happening globally in China, Europe, and in the United States. I think you'll find it interesting, and you definitely need to be aware of what's happening. A little bit on the policy update. That's a fast-changing thing. It's an interesting thing, especially with the new administration. And then talk about some of the testing efforts. And yeah, absolutely. Throw down some questions into the chat or Q&A, and then we'll get to those after and have a discussion. So look forward to that. Just a word about my company. Dean mentioned started as a spinoff of Johnson Controls Automotive, tier 1 supplier. We're a developer of fleet safety, off-road safety products. Most of us we're here in Detroit. Most of us come from the auto world. And do quite a bit of emerging technology integration for government, for fleets, all across the spectrum for tier 1s, and in many cases for the OEMs. So a lot of technicians across the country, and a lot of interesting work around new technology getting into existing vehicles. So let's start with something I think most of you know about, which is V2X. We'll go ahead with the definition. V2X, the X is for everything that a vehicle can talk to. So vehicle to vehicle is V2V, vehicle to infrastructure is V2I, vehicle to pedestrian, that's becoming a more popular one to talk about, is V2P, and vehicle to network is not as common, that's V2N. But just about anything that can talk to a vehicle, it's under the umbrella of V2X. So V2X has always been about saving lives. It's always been as well about emissions and efficiency. And these are numbers that we shouldn't still have in a country as advanced as ours, or even a world as advanced as ours. The numbers are simply too high, and they've been a little bit intractable. That there hasn't been a lot of progress on knocking these numbers down, and in many cases they're going in the wrong direction. So governments and transportation agencies are pretty enamored with the potential of vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure communication, and it's hard to blame them. These are big numbers. But just even diving into some of the individual cases, or some of the specific cases where V2X really makes a difference. 40% of all crashes are in intersections, okay? 6,000 deaths, 500,000 injuries a year in intersections. The most frequent reasons: inadequate surveillance. That's like, I didn't look, is what that one stands for. But most of these can only be solved by V2X. False assumption of other people's actions. That is only a vehicle knowing what another vehicle is going to do. Obstructed view. Only another vehicle knowing where another vehicle is at any point in time. And then especially a case around pedestrian, right? You guys have seen these numbers. They're stupidly ridiculous. Like, we're driving less and killing more pedestrians. How can that be? I think we know how that is, and happening through distraction, but it's almost unnerving to the point where we just have forgotten how to be responsible drivers of vehicles. And if these trends are going to continue in that way, the global countries will have no choice but to do V2X, and that's why it's moving in that direction. So there's a lot of value. There's value on day one with V2X, but there's increasing value with increasing levels of deployment, right? So day one value of vehicles being able to talk to other vehicles. There's a lot of day two value in vehicles being able to talk to each other about what they're seeing. And even if a pedestrian it doesn't have a phone that's enabled, that cooperative perception can take place and create a safer environment. And then, of course, platooning is talked about a lot, and that's a big opportunity in kind of the day three scenario for connected vehicles. And then V2X just simply solves many of the worst crashes. I mean, we talked about some of the ones at intersections, right? Rear end. I mean, no more the guy 2 cars in front of you slams on the brakes and you got to slam yours on, right? You're going to know it faster. The most dangerous accidents, head-on, T-bone collisions, can all be avoided in a vehicle V2X scenario. There's tons of applications. It's like a smartphone. I mean, you just need to add an application for whatever it is you're trying to solve, right? So there's about 60 or 70 of them being tracked by US DOT. Many have been tested at deployments across the country. The most common ones are always the ones that the deployments try first and the testing is trying to prove first. It's forward collision warning, emergency electronic brake light, like we just talked about, blind spot, right turn, intersection movement assist are all very popular examples of alerts, and they're literally apps that are added to the system. And of course, I mean, I think most of you know as longtime SAE members that SAEs had a tremendous role in setting the standards and kind of creating the dialogue for V2X and connected vehicles. I mean, I'm impressed with everybody, all the startups and everybody in this world that doesn't even come from automotive. The one thing they know is they know SAE standards. So there's been a DSRC technical committee. There's obviously now a C-V2X technical committee for the cellular standard. All the folks you would expect are voting members, and then just the key standards that control how these messages are designed, how these messages are communicated, how they're architected, all come from SAE standards. So there's really, I'm not sure SAE gets enough credit, but they're really at the center of advancing this world of connectivity. All right, let's talk a little bit about global developments, right? First, Europe. Now, Europe is interesting. So the United States used to be moving on a road towards DSRC, dedicated short-range communication, as the mode of communication between vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure. Europe is all in on DSRC. They've consolidated on it. They have over 6,000 kilometers of road equipped with it. They're all in. There really isn't a lot of ambiguity about it. They've also added it, V2X, to 2025 Euro NCAP. So that's, as we know, and as this chart shows, whenever a safety technology is added to NCAP, it tends to quickly advance that technology to greater levels of penetration. And the same thing is expected to happen VDEX in Europe. There's a lot of alignment. So the new Golf platform just was launched, has DSRC. There are no RFQs around cellular. They're all DSRC based in Europe, and everybody's now marching to that 2025 NCAP standard so they can advertise 5 stars when they sell their vehicles. China's a different story. China is moving full speed towards cellular VDEX, but aggressively, very aggressively. 2022, 2023, they have a high alignment, as we all know, between the technology development and the government guidance. And right now it seems to be a kind of a competition. I'm not aware of who's further ahead, Buick or Ford with the Mach-E, to do VDEX in China later this year and to launch the first vehicle with VDEX in China. But all the China NCAP type, they're called indices, they're all calling for cellular VDEX in the 2023-2024 timeframe. And again, really solid alignment. Okay, so then let's talk about the US. The US is still not decided. We had been going DSRC until the FCC got involved and said, you know, cellular's better. We should definitely be going cellular. So right now, the new administration has an opportunity to resolve the uncertainty around the standard. The biggest issue in the US is the fact that the FCC not only wants to change from DSRC to cellular, but they also want to hack a large chunk of the band, of the safety band, and that's what's got everybody in an uproar, right? Secretary Buttigieg just said a couple of weeks ago that he's aware of it. He's aware of the issue. Pretty much, you know, US DOT and ITS America the states are all aligned around preserving the safety band, where you know, the FCC is really kind of out there on their own, talking about reducing the safety band to 45 megahertz. Also found it interesting that Chair DeFazio from Oregon, a Democrat, is also adamantly opposed to what the FCC is trying to do. So it's not really a political issue, and it's making for interesting politics in Washington. At the same time, there's, as we know, a lot of new funding coming in, infrastructure funding that could encourage progress in VDEX. There's $1 billion in grants under the RAISE program. There's the FAST Act transportation bill that'll be revisited on May 12th. There's the American Jobs Plan, which is $20 billion for a program called Safe Streets for All, that really focuses on, you know, this pedestrian and vulnerable road user problem and cyclists. And so that's interesting. And they're also focused on Vision Zero cities. And then USDOT is getting money to test 5G, which is the next level of cellular. And then meanwhile, Ford plans to be, I think, the first US automaker to launch cellular VDEX. And there are issues that have to be worked through. We're not really that close in this country to having a solid, agreed upon, tested, validated standard, right? So Vision Zero, one of the things that we're working on is we're trying to certify the retrofit of safety technology through Vision Zero, something called the Vision Zero Automotive Network that we helped start to connect the car to all the Vision Zero efforts around the country, which are great, but they rarely talk about the car. They usually just talk about street design. And we're trying to bring the retrofit of safety technology to the table and to the equation. We've got about 750 installers nationwide. This is a separate non-profit that unifies the companies in the aftermarket to solve and help advance the availability of safety technology on existing cars. And I'm interested in how the government is pursuing Vision Zero as a means to that. That sounds good. As far as testing efforts in the United States, so there's been testing. There's been a lot of interesting deployments across the country. I mean, the first was M-City in 2012 at the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor. That kind of paved the way for other deployments to test this technology and to prove that it works. And what we've seen for sure is that you can show a radio device that works on the bench, but when you actually put it in the car and put it subjected to real world application environments, you discover a lot of issues that need to be worked out. And that's the whole point of the deployments. They're happening all over the United States. They were happening at a faster clip they were starting to accelerate through the Obama administration. One of the last things President Obama wanted to do was make this technology mandatory for new cars starting in 2022. And there was a tremendous amount of work that was happening to advance that around DSRC. The Trump administration, most people say it was basically a 4-year pause because they didn't advance what President Obama had put forward as a standard, a proposed rule. They just kind of froze. And some testing continued, but we're still kind of frozen because of the FCC decision. So it's really interesting thing to follow in this country and to see, hey, when are we really going to get this settled? And when are we going to catch up with, China and Europe in terms of having a solid national direction? So the deployments are great. They start with a smart city. They have roadside equipment. They have vehicles and equipment installed so that they can talk to one another. And then there's deployment teams made up of city people, road people, vehicle people. On the vehicle side, there's a lot of tasks that need to happen. Finding vehicles is one of the hardest things usually because most of the vehicles that DOTs are in use. But that's the key, is getting the vehicles, getting them on an assembly line, getting them equipped, designing the integration solutions for the vehicles, equipping them, and then really maintaining them is a huge factor. One of the things we try to do is make sure they're not putting dangerous displays in with these deployments that are supposed to last for years, with suction cups, and you'd be amazed at how many think that's a valid automotive integration solution. But there's tons of antenna testing that happens to find the right location for the antennas in the vehicle, and tracking that and figuring that out. And then as well, between the vehicle and the roadside equipment, right? That's where kind of the real learning and the real advancement comes in, when you can prove that it works on that street level with real applications. And then after, right? I mean, it's once you have the vehicles running and collecting data, oftentimes you're doing firmware upgrades, and that's actually happening in cities around the country where vehicles have been running around. Real residents' vehicles in a city are driving around, and they're getting over-the-air updates every week or a couple times a week with firmware upgrades. So the technology is really working. Most people aren't aware that it's reached a pretty solid level of maturity. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. just as way of summary, I would say that the VDAX benefits are getting clearer. The more we don't get a handle on increased crash rates in this country, Europe and China appear much further along than the U.S. Hopefully, we'll take this opportunity now to solve our issues and to consolidate on an up direction and move forward. And then I would say that the battle is not really about the DSRC versus the cellular. I think it's more about the spectrum sharing, and will Congress, US DOT, NHTSA, and the president ultimately allow the FCC to limit and reduce the safety band that's been reserved for over 20 years in this country for vehicle-to-vehicle communication. And then once that's all done, I think you'll see, smart cities and DOT will resume testing, and hopefully we'll see much more rapid rollout of the technology. All right, I guess we'll turn it over to back to Delbert or to Dean on Q&A.
Yeah, I think we can stop your screen share, and we've got a few questions that have come in. We'll encourage the audience to post additional ones. Several of them came in about the DSRC versus cellular. I think you've addressed that. I'm curious, one of the questions I have for you is, since you've worked for both OE and the aftermarket, a lot of the things that you've talked about, backup cameras first came about in the aftermarket, and then obviously are in every new car now. With the life cycles of cars, is the time window for the aftermarket smaller, or is it getting bigger? Just from the standpoint, the aftermarket can react so much faster than an OE. What do you see the trend there?
Yeah, I see it kind of going both ways. I see that in many cases the OEMs are actually getting faster at adopting key new technology. But I think there's just always too much technology for an OEM chief engineer, program manager to digest in a single car, right? I mean, there's always going to be technology spilling over. The pace of technology has really increased since I started the company. I don't see it letting up. I think there will always be a role for the aftermarket as long as we're developing new technology.
What anything about regional issues? I listened to a thing about autonomous vehicles, and they talked about if you train a vehicle in Norway, it's going to do miserable in Italy. What do you see in terms of, you talk about pedestrian safety, are lessons learned in Phoenix, Arizona relevant to Boston?
I say no way, Norway. That's what I say. For sure, right? I mean, there's obviously regional differences that all of us as engineers have to deal with in development and testing, but I haven't noticed a difference in terms of the types of products that we market and sell. I mean, not a huge factor.
One of the questions from my side, Jeff, we got a lot of comments with regards to as we see these technologies gain market penetration, them actually causing more distraction, such as, let's use the autopilot in air quotes as an example, with people misabusing the system and not necessarily focusing 100% on the road, thinking that the technology is actually driving the vehicle. Any thoughts as you see the proliferation of these technologies versus distracted driving and Vision Zero applications?
Well, I mean, I think I would say that most of the pedestrian deaths are being attributed to cell phone distraction, to some extent increased relaxed marijuana laws. That's what it's reported. Okay. I don't think at this point, I think it's too early at this point to cite autonomous vehicles or autonomous driving modes, you know, for being at the root of accidents. I think we would hear more about it if they were the cause, right? Is that what you were asking, Delbert?
Yeah, I think with the recent news about the autopilot issues and the different fatalities, it's obviously getting a lot of press, and some people feel as though, you know, people are abusing the system or becoming more distracted. So that.
Well, that's a whole different topic around Tesla, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that can open up the talk about what's responsible for putting, you know, out there in terms of technology. I'm not judging, but it's there was another crash in Michigan. 2 guys got killed this weekend. So yeah, you're right. There's an issue there. There can be an issue there.
Interesting one that popped up here. Are traffic signal manufacturers involved in the V2X discussion?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in a big way. You know, all of them, it's the next level. That's where the technology is being embedded. It's being embedded in the traffic controller, the box that you see on the side of the road, you know, sometimes attached to the traffic light poles or on the ground next to the sidewalk. They play a huge role because they're the eye guys. They're the vehicle to infrastructure, right? They control the messages to the vehicles from the infrastructure. So they play a huge role.
Hey, Jeff, one of the questions comes in, it looks like in comparison to passenger vehicles versus commercial fleets, who would you say will be adopting these CV applications faster?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. I think, you know, as with many safety technologies, right? The more that vehicle is driven, the more that the vehicle has, it's just seeing more hours on the road, and the more there is it's a business decision, what to invest in that vehicle and get a return on investment out of, like a fleet. You're going to see them pull us into the next wave of this kind of automation, and this kind of connectivity, because even a simple thing like traffic signal phase and timing, where it's timed when they get to the light that they get the green. I mean, you can just imagine how much energy that saves, right? If we can give them what's called like the green path, the green wave. So much energy and a ton of safety, right? Again, all these accidents happen in intersections. They're worse with bigger fleet vehicles. Now, I would say, I think that a layer of that is going to be the DOTs are going to equip vehicles as probably around the same time to lead the way, just to lead the way.
Yeah, I just recently saw Biden's mandate where he's transitioned the entire federal fleet
to electric.
And obviously probably going towards CV applications and doing so as well.
Yeah, it's the government has the opportunity to lead and show the way. You bet.
All right, how optimistic are you about global harmonization of rules to where you're not developing completely different setups for Europe, US, Asia Pacific? You know,
I mean, when you look at the situation with Europe, that's very focused on the DSRC standard, and then China, kind of the opposite. Now, of course, there's such a thing as a beta and a VHS box in one, right? That you can have both in a standards in a box, in a radio in the car, but it's not. We're not going fast because we're not aligning around one technology. I think once the U.S. firms up the direction, there'll be a lot more global harmonization, right? But right now, it's still a little bit of it feels like the early days, even though it shouldn't, because we've been at this so long.
Yeah. I mean, you could say not even just the connected vehicle standards, but whether it's safety standards or anything else that, there's been kind of the argument that if we just pick whatever is the toughest standard, make it universal, you reduce costs because you're not doing redundant work.
Yeah. It's not, the toughest. Yeah. I'm not sure the toughest applies in the case of connectivity, but I get your point.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, has there been any study or data on the maintenance costs or the reliability of these V2V, VDX components from the vehicle side?
Yeah, I mean, it's automotive component like any other that has to go through validation testing and plenty of cycles, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So really, in that sense, it's not anything unique because it's another automotive component, another automotive antenna. But that's also part of what the deployments are trying to do, right? They're trying to be out there for 3 years and see vehicles driving around for 3 years. More so, I think not so much the longevity of the hardware, but is the software working? Are over-the-air updates reliable, right? Can somebody just drive through a city and catch the 40 traffic lights that are equipped to send updates to their vehicle? I mean, that's the more interesting.
How about the cost of the upfit of vehicle? You mentioned aftermarket to increase the penetration. How much are we looking at for upfit costs?
I mean, it really varies, and now is not a good time to judge it because it's such small volumes. But I think the goal is to get it to, the $200 to $300 range. Now it's nowhere near that because it's limited quantities. But and that's one of the attractions for the automakers of the cellular approach. DSRC is really a completely different box.
Right, hardware intensive.
Yeah, but cellular gets to use the vehicle's 4G or 5G chipset, right? So in that case, you're kind of you got double duty, and that takes the cost down even further. So that's one of the arguments in favor of cellular.
So who really impresses you on the OE side for where they're going right now in the CV area?
Oh, well, I'll tell you. I mean, all the car companies were. I mean, most of them were taking it very seriously. I mean, Toyota and GM were strong leaders in DSRC. I mean, I think a little trivia question. Do you remember the first car that had DSRC from the factory?
No.
And what year?
No.
Yeah, it was the 2017 Cadillac CT6. Had it built in, and there were some great conversations I heard between CT6s at the Cadillac dealerships. But other than that, it was a great move by GM. Since then, I think Ford's really led the way on cellular. But I don't blame the car companies. They kind of froze when the standard became uncertain. None of them were really able to continue. But Ford's interesting. Apparently the Mach-E will be the first car later this year, next year, that has the cellular standard.
We probably got a question. I know we have a few students. Are you guys hiring? Is Brand Motion?
Absolutely, we are. We're definitely hiring. But
is that on your website? Or we can post that afterwards, I guess.
Please do. Yeah, we're hiring program managers. technicians. I think we have a position open for in marketing. Absolutely, and we're flexible too on where. Obviously, most of our operations are out of Detroit, but yeah, we do stuff all over the country. So
yeah, actually,
send them my way, Dean.
how have you coped with the pandemic from a working standpoint? Were you everyone? How much of your facility was under one roof and everyone working remote? How has that worked out for you?
Yeah, so we did take a break, obviously, a year ago. But then there was I don't know if you had this in California, but we were pretty quickly deemed essential because of some parts we were making for the government fleets and some suppliers we were serving. So that pulled us in back to the office pretty quickly. There was also a great program in Michigan. Again, I don't know if you had something like this in California, but there was a state application process that we could apply for a $20,000 3D printer. And if we agreed in the case of the need for PPP, that we were given that printer to use as we see fit, but standing by to make PPP as needed. I thought that was a pretty cool program. And they automatically send the files just to your building and start printing. It's pretty cool.
A few more questions here. Will this cellular data be recorded? Can it be extracted for post-analysis similar to black box ECUs?
So all of the data is anonymized. It's made anonymous. It's not trackable to the owner of the vehicle. Obviously, it's trackable to the vehicle. As far as black box, that's an interesting frontier, right? I think that's going to be an interesting public policy question, right? Can we use it for those purposes? There's obviously very high standards for cybersecurity on these devices. So those, I would expect you're going to see a lot more of those issues through some of the SAE committees, if you don't already.
Yeah, a couple other questions related just to concern about, the more we add in these features, how much less is someone paying attention to driving?
Right. Big question for all of us, right? It changes the nature of driving. I think we're all seeing the way we're headed. Yeah.
I think there was one question with regards, you touched on cybersecurity. Can you just give a couple of examples on the type of assurances the industry has taken? Is it just with regards to design into the new J standard or other means?
No, there's actually what's called security management certificates. Vehicles will be given certificates that expire, right? So it really helps the elimination of kind of these rogue characters that could try to hack into the system. These security management systems or certificates are managed by different entities. It's a big part of USDOT's approval process, whether they're going to bless this technology as ready for prime time. Those systems have to work very well. But it's similar to what you would see in anti-cyber, cybersecurity protocols in other communication industries.
Someone asked about maintenance costs, which kind of gets into the whole thing of a lot of companies like BMW with subscriptions, to where if you don't pay for the subscription, they can turn off some of the features. Where's the line on some of that with the upgrades Or people are just going to say, well, I didn't pay for the subscription, so now I don't get upgrades. Or if it's safety related, we're going to upgrade it automatically. Is that a company policy, or is there going to be regulations, you think, dictating some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, you really can't do that with a safety technology, right? And it's not really a subscription. It's not really a subscription type thing. You're right. You're not buying into anything. It's more, right. These are more national level decisions, right? Just like we put traffic lights at intersections, right? This is going to be provided.
Yeah.
The infrastructure will talk to the car. Now, I really don't see that on the same level of that kind of a concept. I don't see it as analogous.
Okay. I mean, I've seen some online complaints, particularly about BMW and Tesla, with shutting things off to where the second buyer of the car doesn't get the feature that the first buyer bought.
It's an issue.
Yeah.
Yep. I've had it in one of my own cars.
It looks like the questions and answers are dwindling down. For those participants with any more last minute questions, feel free to just input into the Q&A chat box.
Otherwise, we'll let Jeff tuck his kids in and go to sleep at a decent hour tonight, since he's a little later than we are out here.
They're already asleep, but
Okay.
yeah. No, my pleasure. Anytime.
Well, if there's no more questions, I think, Delbert, thank you, Jeff, for joining us here virtually. Hopefully sometime post-pandemic, you can come out and make a live appearance or something. Our section, we found that we're getting greater attendance on the online technical sessions like this. The people want to hear 45 minutes of great technical content, but they don't want to sit in 2 hours of LA traffic to get to it.
Right on.
We're hoping that later this summer, we'll be able to, late summer, early fall, start to doing some face-to-face things, probably with a focus on student activities at some of the really great car museums and aircraft museums we have out here. So we haven't given up on face-to-face, but we are finding that this is it's a great way to bring people out from out of the area. So you're our second in a row from out of state to present this section. So we greatly appreciate your taking the time.
Indeed. Thanks, Jeff. And if you want to just quickly give your website a plug for those willing to find you or looking to find you, that would be great.
Yeah, appreciate it, Delbert. Brandmotion.com. Just all one word, brandmotion.com. And you can reach me there at jverick@brandmotion.com.
So we'll post that to our Facebook and LinkedIn page also for any of the students or others who are looking for career opportunities who don't mind snow in April.
Yeah, Dean, you fled the other way, I know, but
yeah.
tell everybody it's not that bad.
No, if you want to work in, it is pretty amazing for those you who've only worked in California. It's pretty amazing to go back to Detroit, which is one of the biggest hubs in the world. It is the biggest hub in the world for automotive technology. So it's still pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's changing, and it's a fascinating place to be. All right, thanks a lot, guys, and really appreciate the opportunity. It was fun.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks, John.
Okay, for those participants who are remaining on the line, just a few last-minute housekeeping items with regards to upcoming webinars and activities for SAE SoCal section. Again, as previously mentioned, on April 27th, we have an ADAS webinar, which is Advanced Driver Assistance Systems. We'll be discussing the testing protocols and methods, as well as upcoming future regulations. And then over the summer, we're looking for volunteers to help support the Formula SAE Nevada competition. Again, this information, if those who are interested, can be found on our SAE website, www.saesocal.org. I've also attached a web address here for information on how to register. You can find us on our social media pages, LinkedIn, Facebook. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then for those interested in participating or joining the SAE SoCal section, my name is Delbert Boone. I am the Vice Chair for Meeting and Tours. I can be found via email at meetings.tours@saesocal.org, or my colleague who was also on the webinar tonight, Dean Case, who is the Membership Vice Chair, and his email is membership@saesocal.org. We'd like to thank you for your participation, and we are signing off. Have a great evening.